Welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. I'm your host this week, Brandon Murphy, class of 2017 from the Office of Alumni Engagement. And this week I am joined by Danielle Porcelli Bianchi, Deputy Director, Camp Lejeune Claims Unit, Office of the Judge Advocate General, Department of the Navy, who was Siena College's keynote speaker at this year's Veterans Dinner. A reminder to everybody listening to the Saints and Alumni Show right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. You can also listen on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, and subscribe to the Siena Alumni YouTube channel to check out the complete selection of shows. Danielle, it's so great to have you on campus along with your Greyhound Kingsley, partner Pete, and your parents Stephanie and Bob Porcelli. And Bob is a class of 1966 graduate. A very busy schedule these next couple of days, so we really are so thankful for you to be on the show today. How's it feel to be on campus in the studio with your family and enjoying Siena College?
It's great. I actually have never been here before, so it was lovely to see as we walked over. The campus is beautiful, and I've never been in a studio on a podcast before, so this is unique.
I always love having people in the studio to do the podcast. It's a lot of fun, see all the background stuff that we get to do, and we're going to dive into a lot of great topics today. We're going to kind of do our best to break it down into three categories. We'll have service, professional, and civilian, but it's always tradition when we begin the show to kind of understand why we have the guest on the show. And most of the time, it's around attending Siena College or working at Siena College. And for you, it's a little different as a non-graduate, but we have you as the keynote speaker, and that's kind of how we want to begin to tie in your connection here. Now, you attended a like-minded institution in the Northeast as well, as people know now, connections with Bob Porcelli in that Siena feel. But for you, Danielle, kind of where did you go to college? What were you looking for in a college? And ultimately, where did you end up?
So I did go to Boston College, both for college and for law school. I was looking for a pretty campus and a school that had a kind of structured curriculum, liberal arts education. Certainly the Jesuits do know how to do education, as do the Franciscans. So that was important. One of the things that my dad always said about Siena was he really very much enjoyed the relationship with the friars here on Siena. And I didn't really have that experience at Boston College. They're not quite as ingrained in the school. I think I only had one professor who was a Jesuit, which was not a great experience. You'd have to ask my dad about that. But I did, when I went to law school, we had a professor who was kind of the chaplain for the law school, and it was at that point that I decided, well, let me talk to this guy and kind of see if I can develop that sort of relationship that it seemed like my dad had when he was at Siena. And so I did wind up doing the St. Ignatius spiritual exercises with this priest once a week. We met, and he was kind of like a mentor. It was a good thing because you're going through your 1L year of law school. It's pretty stressful. So it was probably a good thing for me to have something to do that had a spiritual kind of component to it to kind of keep me focused on school and not overwhelmed by school.
And the attendees at the Veterans Dinner this week will have the ROTC cadets, we'll have the cadre, and Siena College is a military-friendly school with the fund to help support veterans returning to get a Siena education and high school students that want to attend college and partake in ROTC and then serve the country. For you, Danielle, did you have a similar path into joining the military? Or if not, what was kind of that deciding factor for you to get to serve the country?
So I did not do ROTC. I like to say I kind of did it the hard way. I paid my way all through college and law school and then decided it was a good idea to go into service. So I don't usually recommend that because there are certainly schools like Siena that offer ROTC. But I commissioned my second year of law school right after 9/11. So the kind of catalyst for me was certainly 9/11, being a New Yorker myself and having some connections, obviously, to that event, which really then had a significant impact on me. So I think I always thought about joining the JAG Corps, But then I kind of forgot about it. And then when I got through, law school, your first year, you're focused on school entirely. And then 9/11 happened, and that kind of was the catalyst, but also the reminder of I thought I did kind of want to serve. And I was already in law school, so the thought being the way I can serve is by being a lawyer.
And we're going to talk a few of those themes in the podcast today and in the keynote address that you have tomorrow about active service men and women and veterans having this unique talent and skill set to serve one another. And after you served your country, Danielle, you did continue to serve professionally as well. And the first stop along the way that we do want to highlight is your time as the assistant to the Deputy General Counsel for the Department of the Navy's Office of the General Counsel. Danielle, for the listeners that may not know exactly what that is, can you tell us what the office entails and a little bit about your roles and responsibilities within that office?
Sure. So the Department of the Navy has a JAG Corps, which are your military lawyers, and then they have the Office of General Counsel, which are your civilian lawyers. So non-uniform members that still serve the Department of the Navy, still providing legal advice. So while after I completed military service as a JAG officer, I did take a quick foray into higher education. I was the director of recruiting at George Washington University Law School. Not the best job, but it was a good first post-service job, and it actually helped me realize that the thing that I was missing for me professionally was that concept of service. That as director of recruiting, I was basically in sales, right, selling the school. So going back to the Department of the Navy and being a lawyer for the Department of the Navy as a civilian was something that obviously made sense for me. As the Deputy General Counsel's office is basically like the managing partner of a big law firm. So about over 700 attorneys in the Navy Office of General Counsel. Every service has an Office of General Counsel. They vary in size. So the Navy's is rather large. And that split between what your military lawyers do and your civilian lawyers do varies based on the service. So the Army, for instance, has a small general counsel because their military lawyers do a lot of those practice areas. So the practice areas are broken up between the two different types of lawyers. And in that job, I basically learned how to manage a large group of legal professionals. We were the hiring office, the firing office, the training office, the professional responsibility office, manage the case tracking information systems, kind of anything you could think about in just managing a large legal office, which has served me well in my current position, which I know we'll get to. So it was a good way to learn an organization kind of from the top. And I was the General Counsel's Director of Communications. So the General Counsel is a political appointee. And so developing his strategic communications, that was also part of my job as the assistant to the Deputy General Counsel.
And we're just about halfway through the first segment of today's show. And for the listeners that know, we like to build and continue the timeline. And that next stop that we have is in 2012, when an opportunity came about for you, Danielle, to be the counsel for the Inspector General at the Marine Corps. And I want to give our listeners a little bit of insight into, through those 6 years or so that you were with them, some of the accomplishments that you are most proud of, that you oversaw or that you assisted in during that time. Can you give us some insights, Danielle?
Sure. So I, as the only lawyer for the Marine Corps in that role, I got to travel the Marine Corps and see all of the Marine Corps. Actually, I did a lot of travel, got to see how the Corps operates, and kind of as the Inspector General's job is to sort of look at compliance as well as do investigations. But part of the job is really looking at the organization and seeing where things might be more efficient. At that time, the military services were really focused on trying to come up with strategies for preventing sexual assault and harassment. It's a continual problem quite frankly, in colleges as well. Yep. But certainly the military group of individuals, it's like a college, right? They're the same type of age group, and kind of it's a small microcosm, right, of society. So at that time, the Department of Defense put together a group of all services and looking at how do we develop a strategy to to not only look at kind of the behavior, but also how do those who may be victims of the behavior report, and then a lot of those reporting channels kind of cross over into different lanes of different groups of people. So we had like Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS. They also have a TV show like The Jaguar. So we had a bunch of different groups that kind of had to come in. The chaplains were there. How do you navigate and support both victims of this behavior, but also, the people who are alleged to have committed the behavior. So it was a massive effort that is still a strategy that is in use today at the Department of Defense level.
And it's like you've been on our podcast in the past. You gave a lot of great answers that lead us into the next topic that we have, Danielle. What I want to do is I want to conclude the first segment talking about this most important role that you had as the Chief Resiliency Officer, and kind of dive into your current role to begin the second segment, because I do want to give its due diligence as it ties in so nicely with Siena College 2 and Project Hope that we have with health, optimism, prevention, and education for mental health here at Siena, and the work that you've done as the Chief Resiliency Officer. Danielle, for the listeners that are curious about this position, can you give us some insights into those roles and responsibilities and why it's so crucial that this happens in the armed forces?
So the 2 Marine Expeditionary Force is basically the 40,000 Marines and sailors that span the East Coast, Europe, and the Middle East. And they are located in North Carolina, in Camp Lejeune. And so they have a 3-star commanding general in charge of that organization. And on that staff of the commanding general are assistant chiefs of staff. They are typically military, colonels for the most part. And this was the first time that they decided to make it a civilian position. And so I was lucky enough to be selected for that. This is a non-legal job. Although all of the training, as we just discussed, kind of all the jobs I had before sort of played very well into giving me a background and a foundation for this position, because we looked at things like preventing sexual assault. We looked at any way Marines could act destructively to themselves or others. Mm-hmm. So substance abuse, suicide prevention, all of the things that I know, again, colleges deal with. And we obviously have a mission, which is to keep people healthy and be able to, go into harm's way. And so those things are detrimental to the mission. And you want to make sure that your Marines and sailors are healthy. So I would give you one example that's probably a good example to explain what we did. But the Afghanistan withdrawal that occurred a few years ago, we did lose a Marine from 2 Marine Expeditionary Force, and obviously there were 13 service members lost in total in that evolution. And so we did have to send a chaplain and some other resiliency professionals forward to the Middle East to provide some of that on-the-ground kind of intervention and support, so that we push all of that overseas so that they get that mm-hmm. before they come back. And obviously then that care is continued when they come back. So that's kind of in a good example of probably the single time that I felt like I was doing what I was hired to do. I was on a kind of 24/7 clock with the chaplain who was overseas, and just trying to figure out, like, okay, what do you need? What kinds of things can we be prepared for mm-hmm. when we come back? What are the struggles that those Marines and sailors are dealing with? Grief, a lot of other kinds of stressors that we kind of cataloged and tried to anticipate their needs when they returned, while he was tending to their needs overseas. So it was busy, it was sad, but again, highlighted the need for having people who are focused on others' resiliency.
Danielle, I think that's a really amazing mission that you and so many others worked on. I know you're going to speak to the Pre-Law Society today as well, but it would be great to have you back in time to speak on those mental health initiatives to the campus as well. Really, really powerful. But when we come back in the second segment of today's show, we'll talk a little bit about the theme of the keynote address, then the best topic possible, your Greyhound Kingsley, as well as some other topics. Stay with us. We'll be right back here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show. I'm your host this week, Brandon Murphy, class of 2017 from the Office of Alumni Engagement. And this week I am joined by Danielle Porcelli Bianchi, Deputy Director, Camp Lejeune Claims Unit, Office of the Judge Advocate General, Department of the Navy. And Danielle is also the keynote speaker at this year's annual Veterans Recognition Dinner. Now, before we kind of dive into speaking with the Siena students, speaking with the veterans community, I do want to highlight your current role and some of the roles and responsibilities that you do have, Danielle. For our listeners who may not be able to attend the Veterans Dinner or are not able to see you in person this week, can you give us a little insights into kind of the current roles and responsibilities that you do have in the current position?
Sure. So as we discussed a little bit earlier, the foundation that I had from some of these other positions has really served me well in the current role. We are a new workforce, a 100% remote workforce. We are the only 100% remote workforce in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. And we have about 135 people. And what we're doing is processing and paying out claims that claimants are making as a result of potential exposure to water on Camp Lejeune. So I'm sure most people have seen the ads on TV, but that's what we're doing. It's a big mission, obviously, to review all of those claims, make sure that they are valid claims, and then pay out every valid settlement. And the kind of foundation from the previous job, being my first job on the civilian side as the assistant to the Deputy General Counsel, where I said more like a managing partner of a firm, as the deputy director of this unit, it's managing a firm. And that firm is dispersed across the entire country, different time zones, and all trying to, again, hire, fire, work training, make sure that folks understand, the legal implications and understand the way the legal framework applies to these claims. And the remote workforce is challenging. So, to make sure that as a day-to-day workforce, it's challenging more so than just if you teleworked from home a day a week, because there is no office to go to. So you can't mail anything to the office. You can't bring people in if they're not understanding, what's going on. So it does stretch your management abilities. And on top of that, obviously, it's a new area. The Camp Lejeune Justice Act that was passed is new. So it isn't something, it's got bases in other areas of law, but it is new. So, again, trying to figure out how that applies and what that looks like. So it's a lot of initiation, kind of initiative that I feel like in a lot of my other positions, being the first person, the first civilian on a staff or the first person to do this portfolio, I think those kinds of things have made me pretty comfortable in the unknown.
And it's a really interesting benchmark, right? So you began with the only attorney in the building to now overseeing over 100 attorneys on a day-to-day basis. And that perspective is so unique to share, and we're lucky to have that perspective shared with the pre-law students at Siena College. It's part of a 2-day trip that you have here on campus, along with that dinner. But what are you looking forward to when you speak with pre-law students and the message that you want to relay to young, aspiring attorneys and what that career could entail in helping others?
Sure. So in preparing for meeting with those students, my significant other is also a lawyer, and we do talk about, would you encourage somebody to go into the legal profession these days? I mean, it's certainly a versatile educational background, but it is very expensive, and it is 3 years of your life. So one of the things that, I tried to kind of highlight in that chat with the pre-law students was give some thought to what you actually want to do with your legal career, because you may decide that you don't really need a legal degree. I mean, for instance, my background, there are jobs I needed to be a lawyer to have, but I also had a lot of management jobs that really I could have been in management or business or something, right? And not to say that business school is it's any less expensive, but again, I think that they're giving some thought to that general plan and the choices that you make. I have gone away from the law and come back, so that's why I say kind of versatile in that regard, because you can always say, it defines you sort of, you went to law school, so you certainly have that feather in your cap, if you will. But I do think that it's something, given the cost of education, that really should be considered closely, because you can do a lot with a legal degree, but you can also do a lot without a legal degree. So I think it just depends. And when I did work at GW, as I said, we did have, this is why I pointed this out to the students, the big financial crisis in 2008 was during those students' time. Mm-hmm. And so they went from thinking that they could afford to pay back the expensive education to now law firms not employing them during the summers or after. So a lot of them didn't have solid lock jobs. And so that was very traumatic for a lot of them, obviously. And so you never know, right? You don't really ever know kind of what your post-law school career will look like. So you have to be all in on understanding you're going to be paying something back for a long time.
My brother is an assistant district attorney up in Saratoga, and I remember him going through that law school process. I literally remember cutting up celery and carrots for him and bringing groceries up every week as he begins to study for that bar exam and pass that bar. And I now kind of want to pivot over to the other main topic that we have on campus and the reason why you're here as the keynote speaker. You're here on Siena's campus, a place so special, so close to your father, Bob, speaking on a topic with the veteran community so close to you. What's it mean to be here on campus addressing the veterans of the Siena community? And can you give us some insights into what your speech is about this year as you address our veterans?
So, sure, for me, being asked to do this was a huge honor. I didn't really understand why I was asked or kind of what I could contribute. So, but being asked and saying yes, was, again, kind of game on to figure out what I could speak about that would be helpful. And I did sort of come around this theme of like, I'm not really that interesting, so I don't know why anybody would want to invite me to be a keynote speaker. But as I started going through, my career and talking with you, certainly in preparation for this podcast, I started to realize that it's all the different experiences that veterans who, make up the top 1% of America. So it's not a lot of people. And they do have unique and interesting experiences. And it's those things that they do. And again, I think on that versatility theme, veterans it's even more versatile than a legal career. You learn a lot as a service member. So whether it's the attendees to the dinner who are in the ROTC, trying to give them some perspective of you're going to learn a lot. You're going to come out with a lot of different skills that you may be able to use, and you never know when you'll be able to use those skills. And also, encouraging the veterans in attendance who probably feel the same way I do, that our lives are not super interesting, but it is kind of our duty as veterans to educate the other 99% of the country of what experiences we did have. And because they are interesting, they're unique, and they're valued. And I think, in a time period where we're seeing a decrease in people interested in going into service, I think it's important, to share your stories with other people. Even if you don't think they're that interesting, they probably are, and make those connections. I think you and I, even just in prepping for this, had a lot of connections that just sharing my story with you and yours with me, we made those connections.
I know from that pre-interview, I'm looking at the notes right now. We could do 5-6 segments of all the things that we think is amazing and so interesting to talk about. But you kept mentioning the unique skills and the unique experiences, and I think we really want to kind of hone in on and maybe some really close to home examples that you've seen in your hometown of North Carolina. When you look at the veteran community after they take off the uniform and continue to serve their local community, what are you kind of seeing down in North Carolina on a day-to-day basis, or just some points that you'd like to highlight?
So, I mean, we talked about, kind of the mental health, and one of the things, since we've mentioned my favorite thing in the whole wide world, Kingsley, my greyhound, I got him around the same time as I was in that position, and I brought him to work a couple times, and I just watched people, and we just saw it just now, walking across the student union. I mean, watching students, or in that case, Marines, just come up to an animal, and watching their entire stress level just decrease gave me a sense of, there's something really to this connection with animals. I think I happen to have a great one, but I think that connection is there regardless. And in thinking about kind of coping mechanisms or mental health challenges or things that veterans may struggle with post-service, I mean, obviously, again, we talked about the Afghanistan withdrawal. individuals need an outlet. They need kind of a mechanism or something to focus on. And I do think, giving your service to taking care of another, whether it be an animal or another person, animals are a little easier because, you're really their person. I mean, they can't take care of themselves. So, so I think looking at that and in recently kind of seeing the devastating Hurricane Helene that came through Western North Carolina, and which is a part of North Carolina that doesn't see this kind of destruction from hurricanes often. We were watching just the stories of people who just went out to help, like just got in a truck, or they happened to know how to fly a plane or a helicopter, or just had the skills of the logistics to be able to do something. They were veterans, and so that's kind of where I said in the speech, you don't really know what your experiences will portend in the future, and you do have a skill set that others either don't have or don't really know how to use, right? And as somebody who's come out of service, you don't really have a choice. You have to use it in service, so you kind of figure out the motivation to help others and help yourself, and knowing that it's your two hands maybe sometimes that are the only helping implements. I think that is something that I tried to highlight in these engagements this week.
And we've got just under 5 minutes left in today's show, and just time for a couple of questions left. And I kind of now want to really give the focus to the Greyhound Kingsley and really talk about Kingsley literally just for 15 minutes in the student union at the coffee shop. 5 to 6 students came up and were in love with Kingsley. And that 5 second was a positive impact for those students. But for you and your family, Kingsley has played a very impactful role in your life in a short period of time. Can you give our listeners some insights into, how you met Kingsley and the impact Kingsley has had on you and Pete?
Sure. I decided that I, wanted to adopt a dog because I wanted to expand my family, and given the age I was at the time, realistically that meant a dog. But I did some parameters of what I was looking for in a dog. Mainly, didn't bark, was pretty clean, didn't shed. I think that was about it. But so he, is all of those things, as he's actually laying here in the studio right now, completely asleep, and hasn't made a peep. But what I realized is obviously I indicated I've not been a mother, right? So this is my first mothering experience, and you do learn a lot about yourself in those times. But I did realize that he's become kind of my purpose. So in looking at, I'm not immune to my own stressors and kind of things you combat on a day-to-day basis, and knowing that I have somebody that absolutely relies on me to make sure he gets fed and goes out and sort of those kind of basic needs has really put things into perspective for me. I'm not still great at it. Like he could probably teach me every day about how to just chill like he's doing right now. And I'm a huge work in progress. So, I haven't mastered that level of relaxation. I strive to it. But Pete always reminds me, you got to be in the present moment, because otherwise, you miss your life and you don't really know, your house may be gone tomorrow, you may be gone tomorrow. And so just kind of using him as an example of, Kingsley is very much in the present moment at all times. And so it's kind of a daily reminder to me. I don't need a daily affirmation. I guess he is my daily affirmation. So I think that's probably the best way I could sum that up.
Danielle, it's been so great to have you, Pete, and Kingsley in the studio today on campus. The past couple of days here, sharing your experiences with the Siena community. And the one last thing I do want to conclude with, as you look back and reflect on over 20 years of service and professional service to the country, kind of what are you most proud of, or what continues to motivate you to helping veterans and the community that you live in?
Yeah, so you said like over 20 years, and I just felt really old. I did the math quickly in my head. I was like, wow, he's not wrong. It is actually over 20 years. I kind of knew that when I just paid my bar dues. You have to say how many years of practice you've been in. So I don't feel that old, but I truly don't. Where it may sound like I had a plan, because kind of as I talk about things now, it kind of fits together in a nice little story. It almost looks like I planned out some of these jobs. I mean, I absolutely didn't have a plan. And, I just tried to do the best I could in every position that I was in, whether it be, as a student in school and then any kind of job that I held afterwards. And so, being recognized for your contributions is certainly a nice thing. But, for me, that's not the motivating factor. I mean, the motivating factor for me really is for somebody who worked for me, who I have one Marine who will drop me a text every time he catches a big fish. Those are the kinds of things that, and I'm not even sure when he was working for me, I thought he didn't really even enjoy he didn't enjoy the work and probably didn't really enjoy working for me either. But clearly, there was some kind of connection there. And those are the things, those are the recognitions where, those thank yous and those are the things that really, mean the most to you. And I think that, you never know the impact you have on people's lives. And like we said, walking through the student union, I mean, there might have been somebody struggling with something really significant and, 3 pets with the dog really just like gave them a different perspective on life. And we even met some former Greyhound owners out there. So,
there's a lot of them.
You never know. So yeah, I just think you really don't know the impact you have on people's lives. And so you just try to be a good steward of your service and your help to others and hope that, you've made some connections that are useful for them or for you. So.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much, first, for your service to the country, for being on the podcast today, the impact that your speech has made on our veterans and the veteran community. It is always one of my favorite events that we hold here on campus, and we were so happy that you were the keynote speaker for this year's event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Saints and Alumni Show. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint.